Hello, Jim Howard here in Fort Worth, Texas. Today's date, it's May 16th of 2023. I had to tell you that information because I don't have it up at the top here because I'm using my B-Link 2, and I have hooked up a second monitor. So on this desk I have two monitors. Over here I only have the one monitor, but anyway, trying to switch things around. I hope the audio is okay. I think it will be. I'm using the Razer, what is it, Keo Pro camera, which is my best. This one over here is good too, the Avery Media, but this one is really best. I've got it, so I'm using it, and right now I am using the built-in microphone, and it's not bad. I think most, well, maybe not most, but YouTubers try to avoid using USB, cameras with the built-in microphone. They go with something else, and I've been with them. I've tried them all, and but this one is, it's not bad. So let's see. I've been moving stuff around, changing stuff. So I have two monitors here. One is the LG monitor, and the other monitor is, I forget the name. Let's see. Okay, it's so dark. I mean, they don't have any. They didn't put any. There's no. I forget what it's called. It's one that I mentioned that I think it's a Vista something. A monitor that I hate. But the reason I hate it is because when you want to hook connectors up to it, there's like a ridge on the on the back, and so they're up underneath it. Not so when you want to plug in all my other monitors, you just take and plug things in. It's there. These are up underneath the shelf, and you have to find it and plug it in. It's a good monitor, and it has. I can't see it right now because I got it mashed up next to this other one, but it's got micro for micro cable, and it has also on the side outlet, and has all kinds of different things, but I have to hook the cables up before, so I have them hanging down right now, the ones that I'm not using, because I don't want to have to try to plug them in here, so they're already plugged in. I do not know how in the world I installed it. I mean, I know I installed it, but it was something that I clicked on, the screen, and now you can't see it, but I don't know what it looks like. I mean, it looks like a screen from maybe a place where you launch nuclear missiles or something. All kinds of, well, it's in foreign languages too, so I hope it's not. English is popping up, and I think it's Chinese or Korean or I don't know what. And I'll have a problem finding what in the hell, how to turn that thing off. So I wanted to test this setup, which should be working okay. And I may be, now that I have two monitors here, of course I have this large one over here, but of course it doesn't look large right now. I mean, but it is. Maybe I will be doing my YouTube videos over here. But what I want to do is, you see above here, where, nope, god damn it. I'm going to change those, and then when I make a video, I won't have to say, this is Jim Howard, and I'm in Fort Worth, Texas, and the date and the time and the weather, and I mean, it'll be up there. Except right now I'm still having trouble, like over here where it's at the top. But I have trouble remembering, because I've been doing it since 2005, when YouTube came along, after I had been streaming video and doing all kinds of stuff since before there was a YouTube, or before there was just about anybody. I've told that story a dozen times, more than a dozen times, so I'm going to tell you again right now. I accomplished, my son had to help me a little bit. This chair is an office chair or whatever. So I've had a mat from the very beginning, underneath it, which is kind of worn out. That may be something I'll check on. I mean, there's still some life left in it, but there's a spot or two where this wheel gets into like a place where it's kind of broke through. But he helped me. Since I put this 7-foot table here, back a little further than normal, and it's the same kind of table as this one. When I made this move, then when I pulled my chair back, two of the wheels or whatever would go on the rug, and then so he helped me. He just raised up a little bit. I thought he was going to dump everything, because I'm telling him, take it away, but not him. Raises it up, but it worked. So now I got this sliding around here. So I may be making my YouTube videos using this hardware. I'm still using Manicam. It's kind of funny. I didn't know for a long time, but Manicam, they have a referral thing where if you refer somebody to them, I mean, I've referred people to them, but just with a link, hey, manicam.com or whatever, But for quite a few years, I've known that they have a thing where if somebody, clicks on a link that you put there, you get, a commission. Well, what's interesting, and I just found this out, and I don't know, maybe the last year or something like that. This shows you how far behind that. If you then were to click on that, if you click on it, it's one of these links for Manicam. Now I don't have that. I just say, hey, I'm using Manicam, and maybe have a link to them. But there's no, commission. I mean, I don't have the code in there or whatever. I haven't done that yet. But if you sign up that way and you continue to use Manicam, but an awful lot of you, use, I can't remember the name, which I don't like. I should like it, but I just don't like it. I like Manicam better. It's kind of simple. It does everything I need for it to do, but it's simple. But anyway, Manicam's setup is the way it's set up. Say I had a link, say I had their link, with the code in, and you clicked and you went there, you get a nice, nice little commission. I mean, a little bit, but it's a nice one, not bad. I forget what it is. I mean, you wouldn't get rich with it, anything. But then when you renew, you get a nice little amount of that renewal. And it keeps doing that. So I've been using Manicam, I don't know how long, but a long time. If some of you had been, but I don't think a lot of you would, because you like, what's it called? It's in USB and windows and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it would be nice. I'd have a nice little amount of money coming in. I don't know how much. Well, it would depend on how many of you decided to do that. And I think an awful lot of YouTubers and the people from the internet, is sort of like a tradition from the internet. When the internet started out, before there was anything, people just got into a habit, and they also just flat out refused. They are not going to pay for anything. And I think it's kind of carried over in a way, a little bit of it, or maybe the same people. Maybe we haven't died out, except I was never one of them. If somebody would, in the past, write a program or a utility or do something or other, I'd pay for it. And I told you about the first really webcam software. A guy was writing the software. My nose, I don't know why my nose started running whenever it started running. It never used to. And now I have to keep a handkerchief or toilet paper handy or something. It just runs for some reason. I'm falling apart, I guess. But a guy, wrote some software to, use a camera and audio and whatever, and I donated money to him, and then he also would ask, hey, what can I do to improve my software? And from almost the very beginning, I said, no, it's perfect, I can't think of anything else. And he would add something, and I'd go, wow, and then he would add something more, whatever. But anyway, he was just, doing this at home, and I don't think he actually, I think I donated, but he wasn't asking for any money. And so finally, he put a thing up, that he wasn't charging for it, but if you wanted to, you could, and I think he would give you some preferential treatment or something rather. But I immediately sent him a check. That's before there was PayPal, or the one that was before PayPal, or the one that was before PayPal for that. And I had to write a check, And so when he got home from work that day, and when I logged in, because I logged in almost every day, and I logged in and he popped in, he said, Jim, he said, I got your check in the mail. He said, I was so happy to get it. Thanks a lot. He said, my wife has been telling me I'm never going to get a 1 penny, ever. And he said, so I said, I went and got her and showed her the check, and his wife was sitting there or whatever, with him. He went on to sell that, and I forget what he sold it. And I think he was joking. So it was later on. He kept working on his program a little bit. And then one day he says, well, Jim, I sold the program, to such and such a corporation, and my wife and I are going to be, and I forget what he said, we're moving to Hawaii, or I thought, God damn, how much did he get? But it was years later. There still wasn't a program like that. And I told him I was working in Miami, Florida at CompUSA, and there was his software, in a box. And I was pricing stuff, That was my job. I was the only one pricing everything there. They didn't put the prices on the product. The price was on, underneath the products on the shelves and things like that. But anyway, there. So every day when I was pricing, I'd see that. Now there was one guy, and I donated for his. He did the same thing back about that time, maybe a little bit later, and his software was a little bit different, but I liked it, and I donated from time to time. And I think I was about the only one that was actually, donating. And he, same thing, he said, with me, Jim, is there anything you can think of that I can, that I can add? I really honestly couldn't think of it. I guess I showed, hey. But I really couldn't, but he kept adding things. One of the things that I liked is that he put in there that you could, when people would go into chat or whatever, you could put in, I can't remember if I put anything. I think I did to test it out. But you could put in there into the chat thing that would go in there. You would see it, and the other people wouldn't see it. They wouldn't know what it was. But if they say I put in handsome bald man or something, if somebody typed bald headed, and of course you could put in, if somebody fuck you, then you could have it in there that would be Jim, you're just a wonderful person, whatever. That was kind of neat. That's one of the things that he did. He did a bunch of other stuff like that. He kept asking, I never could think of anything, and he would make a big improvement. Then one of the things he came up with was, back then, if you could have one, well, in the beginning they weren't USB webcams. They were RS-232 port things. And, well, they used them, and then eventually they came out with USB and all this kind of stuff. And, but in the beginning there, you could only run one camera. If you tried to plug in a second camera, no. Eventually, one of the companies came around. They had pretty neat software too. Now they were a little more advanced, and you could have multiple USB webcams. I don't think they were USB then. I think they were RS-232 or whatever. But they, it was set up that way. And but before that, and I think even after that, this guy, he said, would you think I should set this up, this software where somebody can run 2 or 3 cameras or 4 cameras? I said, that would be great. So bang, he did it. And so now he was working on, well, now he was charging for his software, that's right. But I think he only charged, he charged once or something, then he updated it because I had paid. And then he said, well, Jim, you've got, he said, I think he said, you're the only one that's paid for the multi-camera, software. And then he says, but he was still developing it. And kind of weird. I've mentioned this several times in the past. Nobody's ever answered. He said, just one day he says, Jim, the regular one camera, it's done. Unless he says, unless you can think of something. I said, I can't think of anything else, with it. And and he said, and the multi-camera version, he says, will be done this afternoon. He says, you'll be able to download it this afternoon. And I said, okay, great. Not that I didn't really care that much about it, but But so that afternoon I logged in. It wasn't available. I mean, I could still download the beta version or something. And he didn't get into chat or anything. I didn't bug him. I just figured, and I figured for a week or something. Well, something must have come up. but nothing was changing on his site. Nothing was changing. No comments, whatever. Anyway, I checked for weeks, months. That was it. Gone. I mean, now he didn't just, quit. He didn't get a little bit of money and quit. I don't know if he died. I don't know if he was arrested. I don't know what happened. So finally, after quite a while, I did a search, started asking on some other sites, hey, this guy that does such and such, anybody know anything about him? Nothing. And it was like, I don't know, a year later, I went to his site, the same as that day that, that he said, this afternoon, Jim, you can log in. Nothing had changed on his site. I don't know, and I checked for quite a while. Seriously, what happened to him? I actually logged in to the, whatever town it was in. I went to their obituary things. I logged into their news things to see, hey, did an aircraft crash in on this town or whatever? So weird. Anyway, let's see, I've been talking for 21 minutes, and I'm going to upload this just so you know what's going on. Let's see what's going on. This is, the Windows 10, because that's the Dell computer, the $200 one that I got, from Amazon. That's really a good deal. I mean, of course, a bunch of you have, $200, old, but some of you maybe don't. It works just great. About $200. Now, if you can afford a little bit more, you can get more, get with a little more stuff with it, memory, that type of stuff. So that's that computer. Everything is working fine. It's Windows 10. I don't care if it doesn't get updated to Windows 11. Over here is the B-Link 2 with the two monitors, 1080p. And what I'm going to do today is change the thing up here at the top like I have over here. Whoops, I saw a little pause there. Let me do a clap here and see if if we're... I think it's syncing, right? Well, I'll let you watch. Let's see, we'll go over here. Now, where it says microphone down there, I'm going to clap, and we should get a I'm going to just move this up a little bit. I think I'll put it on 85. That's not going to have anything to do with the syncing, but well, it looked like it did. Okay, back. Anyway, I'm going to whoops, moved the wrong one. So I'm going to work on the tagline up there, putting in the date and the time and how long the video's lasting or whatever. And then I may mess with some other stuff. I'm still not feeling good. I mean, I'm 82, and I don't drink water. Never drank water. It's a Trump scheme to destroy your manhood. Water. So you don't want to. What movie is that from? You don't want it to sap your vital fluids. Oh, I've never drank water. Okay, almost never. I might have been someplace where I had to drink out of a drinking fountain sometime because, but never, I really haven't, I drank Coke since I was little, all the time. Not that's not good for your health. Actually, it was Pepsi. And when I got married at age 26, the wife then, she drank Coke, so I would have, when she would go to the grocery store, she'd get Coke and she'd get Pepsi. And finally I just said, you're drinking Coke, just don't be buying both, just buy the Coke. And I switched, So anyway, now I worked all my life, never without a job. And then a lot of times I had 2 jobs. And my wife and I, we had a couple businesses. One for 4 years, tropical fish shop, and one a security patrol service. That's before security became a big thing. I knew it was going to be a big thing, and that's why I told her, hey, we need to get into that. And it turned out I was correct, of course, like I'm always correct. Just teasing. I have a bad habit. I guess I have a sense of humor, or I have a sense of humor where I say things. I can't remember jokes or anything like that, but I come up with some pretty good zingers at the right time. Well, not at the right time if you're trying to deal with bosses, maybe, because then when the boss goes crazy and starts yelling and screaming that he's going to fire you, or you quit, go ahead and quit, get out of here, I don't want you in my department. Instead of me saying, Mr. Ross, I was just kidding, which 3/4 of the time I was. Instead of me saying that, then I double down. I've told some of those stories. I should put them all together. Now you're not interested. I know the ex-wife isn't interested, never was interested. And the people I worked with, it was just one, well, not just one director of security. Anybody in authority. I do, now that is a thing, I do have, anybody that's in authority. I just rubs me the wrong way. I don't know why. So, I went out back a few years ago to Washington, D.C. for 2 weeks to visit with my oldest daughter and her husband. And so we talked and went out, and by the way, my oldest daughter and her husband, they became vegetarians. And I love my oldest daughter and I love my other kids, even my son who is driving me crazy. But I've talked here before. My plan, I went, from Catholic grade school to a Catholic military academy because I wanted to go into the military. That's what I wanted. I had an older cousin, quite a bit older, and he went in the Army, made a career in the Army, so I guess that's probably the reason. But I was 40 pounds, I think, under the minimum weight requirement to get in to the military. I found that out after I graduated from De La Salle Military Academy and went down right away to enlist. And anyway, so now I worked when I got out of high school, I worked as a welder for years. and years. And then later on, I worked for the post office, but only for a couple months. And quit, and nobody could believe it. They hired in. When I hired in, there was 200 people hired in. I was number 200 on the list of, a lot of military people or that type of people. They got, extra points and stuff that moved you, But anyway, I still was 200 on the list. And then 2 weeks later, they hired in 200 more, and then the next week they hired in 200 more. Eventually, shortly after that, I quit. I didn't like the post office. The people couldn't believe it. Well, this is a career civil service appointment. I said, I don't care. Well, you'd have to sign a such and such. I said, where do I sign, And that might have been the start of a little bit that I had a problem with maybe authority. But I mean, when I was working as a welder, I was underneath railroad cars, welding for 8 hours and stuff, and outside laying underneath railroad cars with it raining, and me every time I strike an arc getting, electrocuted. Not electrocuted, by the way. I've talked about that before, so. But then when I got into about 1972, working at a hospital, and it just so happened I'm working hospital security, that's when it came up. I don't like somebody telling me, that they're a VIP, Well, we get special, we get special parking. We get special, the wife here, she doesn't have to go through the admitting department. They just take her right up to her room because I'm on the, the board of trustees, they have all kinds of boards, stuff like that. So anyway, when I was in Washington, D.C., my grandson my son-in-law, Jim, whatever made you think that you could go into the military because of the way you are, not liking authority, not liking to take orders and that kind of stuff? And I said, I didn't know. It never occurred to me. I think if I had gone into the military, I think I would have changed. Well, I wouldn't have been doing the kind of stuff, I wouldn't have been joking with the drill instructor, if the drill instructor said something, who in the hell do you think you are? This is the United States. I'd have probably said something. I don't think I would have. I think I would have been smart enough to know, hey, I want to spend 20 years in the military and retire with a pension. Now, what I found out later on, many years, not very long ago, from a site online where people ask questions about things. And I haven't been doing it as much, but I spent where's the time here? People were asking a lot of questions on this. It was quota. I think is the name of it. And I was spending too much time, hours every day, reading these questions and the answers. And by the way, if you answer, now most people just answer yes or no or I don't know or whatever, but I did, on a few subjects that I was knowledgeable on, just a few topics, because I'm not that smart. And they're there. If you want to find out about parking and handicapped parking spaces, you'll probably find my 2 or 3 things that I have written in about very few about hospital security or something. But what I did not know and just found out fairly recently is that and I got out of high school in 1959. That's when Vietnam was going on. Kind of a bad time to go in the military, I guess. I found out that later on, if you were for the Army, not for the Air Force or Marine Corps or anything like that, but if you were going in the Army, that they would take you if you were overweight. Now, I don't know how much, but you know, sizably overweight, or if you were underweight. I was underweight, way bad underweight, because I lived on TV turkey dinners and Pepsi at that time. No, this all started because I was going to tell you it was surprising that I was, healthy. Later on in life, I'd go in for when I had the heart problems or whatever. You know, the nurses like, okay, how many operations have you had? None. No, Mr. Howard, how many operations have you had? I've never had an operation. You're whatever my age was. You've never had an operation. That's remarkable. I said, well, I had my tonsils out. No, Mr. Howard, that doesn't count. I said, oh, okay, well, that's all I've had. Then, of course, I had to have a pacemaker put in, and now I've had my second pacemaker put in and all this kind of stuff. But where's the time on this thing? I forgot. 36 minutes. Good time to end this, and then I can start working on this software. And when my daughter came over with which I really, really like, she gave me a Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, and the battery apparently died after a while. So I told her, hey, I don't, and it was actually hard to learn. Well, this is a Samsung Galaxy Note 9, and she brought it over the other day, and she took the one that was broken, and she took the brand new battery for it and the kit to fix it or whatever. So, and then she had told me, she said, well, I'll get it fixed, for you, and that kind of. Well, first she just had the kit sent to me and everything. I am not going to heat this. I'm not going to heat a cell phone up. With a heat gun or whatever it is, so I can pop the thing and get the battery out. I know it wouldn't work out well. A lot of you people do that all the time and stuff like that, but wouldn't have worked well for me. So then she said, well, I'll come and get it and bring you another one, a Samsung, Note 10 Plus, the same thing, because she had 3 of them till she gave me one. One for her and one for her son, her own son. And I said, no, I don't need it. I said, and I said, do you happen to have some old, Sure. She has a bunch of old cell phones. I said, just give me one of those. And she said, well, no, I want it. And I said, no, I don't really want it. It's too complicated, whatever. And so she said, okay, when I come, she didn't come over for a week or so. So she was really working and had some car trouble and stuff. So I was without a cell phone. And so then, by that time I told her, I'm just going to go ahead, a new Motorola model year 23 stylus is out, $200. I'll just order one of those in. And she said, well, so I told her, just come and pick this up. The new battery not installed yet is here, the kit, and come and take it, and I don't need it. Well, she showed up yesterday, I think it was, with the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. Now the Note 10 was gold, and this is silver. I like the looks of it. Now there's something about when she brought that other one that I did wrong. When she came, she was in a hurry when she brought the first one to give me. And she showed up, and she wanted to make sure I knew how to do it, but she also needed to be someplace. So I just wanted to take it step by step, slowly, inch by inch, step by step. Niagara Falls. If you're old enough to remember that, you are better be planning your funeral, because I'm old enough to remember that from the olden days. I used to do that to when I was a kid, to the Labrador Retriever we had. She was a Labrador Retriever. They're not the most, But anyway, we had her for a long time. And I'd say, she'd be in there, in the living room or whatever. And then I'd say, Niagara Falls. And she would freeze. Wouldn't move her eyes, wouldn't do anything. And then I would do, step by step. I forget what the other thing was. And then, and she would just freeze. I get up right on top of her and put my hands right next to her head and everything, and she wouldn't look. And then I'd say, Niagara Falls, and then she'd just start jumping up and down, all happy and everything, whatever. So, anyway, my health problems hit me late. But I'm 82 now. And I haven't been, there's a whole bunch. I need to see about 4 doctors. Somebody who never saw doctors. And 2, with the work that I did, and usually 2 jobs for years and years, I had 2 jobs. Now when I was a welder, I didn't have 2 jobs. When we had the tropical fish shop, I didn't have 2 jobs, that kind of stuff. But when I was working hospital security, I had a full-time job in hospital security. And then I worked part-time contract security, which was just 10 cents or 20 cents above the minimum wage, for that job. The hospital security paid pretty well, especially in the beginning. They paid well, and then towards the end, the hospital, especially the one I worked with, they got, and they were for not just for security, but for all the employees. Because like the one hospital I worked at, 5 years, they paid 1 to 7%. They gave you your merit review, and you got 1 to 7%. Now anybody that's going to get 1% or maybe 2%, I don't know how it went. But they're probably going to be letting you go. Anyway, when I hired in there, because that was my second hospital security job, the other hospital that this was the second one. When I hired in, you got a review. I didn't even know that. After 6 months, you got a merit review. So I went in. I knew what to do. I just knew what to do. And I went in and I did what I needed to do on the day shift. And then the director of security, I'd see him parking his cars. When he would come in, I basically wouldn't see him the rest of the day. I'd be doing my job. And, outside in the rain and snow, or, handling a parking situation, whatever needed to be done. Anyway, he called me up to the office, come on up, So I went on to the office, went in, he says, when you're here 6 months, we do a merit review, and here's your merit review, and he slid it across. And as I was, reading it, and then I signed it or whatever. But anyway, when I was reading, I thought, I got 6.5%. 7 was the highest you could get. And I thought, Jesus Christ, this guy fucking loves me. And I had no idea. I just was doing my job. I didn't know that he even noticed or anything. And then after that, and once a year I got a merit review. And then I always got 7%. And 2, then he wrote things in, that when he became an assistant hospital administrator, I should get his job as director of security, whatever. And of course, and I told him, Mr. Ross, you are never going to be a hospital assistant administrator. But it's kind of funny. He was kind of driving me crazy. Finally, it was like I finally could not take him anymore. I mean, it was just, and I thought, why didn't this guy understand? I did merit review, or I did grievances against him, and several of those times the grievances were, well, I didn't do a fake grievance, but when I said something or whatever, you can't do this or whatever the situation was. On some of them, I was purely joking, but well, I'll tell you the one of them. I was a supervisor and doing my job, that kind of stuff, and then the director of security, Jim, I'm going to be going to Washington D.C. to testify before a congressional committee. I said, wow. I said, wow, great. And he said, the guy at I think probably the House of Representatives, I'm guessing, he deals with people all the time who are coming to testify, before Congress, a committee, testifying before a committee, And he says, that he says you have to give a presentation in writing of what you're going to testify to and say. And he said, and I had to send that. And he said, the guy told me, yours is the best one that I have ever seen, and he handled all these things. And I said, oh, congratulations, And so then he went and testified, and then he comes, I don't know, it was weeks later or something, he went to Washington, D.C., came back, and had testified. And then he had the thing, from the government printing office or whatever it is, of his testimony before the committee. But anyway, I was busy. I was always busy. And he, in my merit reviews, he wrote stuff, Jim, everything that, things get handled with no blah, 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 they just get handled, and they're handled, and there's no, and stuff like that. So I was busy, too. Hey, Jim, I want you to read this. And I said, Mr. Ross, please, I need, got stuff I need to do, No, Jim, I want you to read it. No, please. And so then he said, no, Jim, do it. So I said, okay. So I read it. I'm a good reader, and I'm a fast reader. I read the thing. And then he was like waiting around the corner or something right there. Did you read it? And when I read it, I knew exactly what happened. There was 4 people, directors of security, testifying. One was for a nuclear power plant, and one was for a security, type of operation at some place, and blah, blah. And then there was Mr. Ross. So the Congress asked, the congressman asked and I knew that Mr. Ross would be looking around to see where the cameras are, leaning in to get on the that's just the way he was. And I knew he'd be that way. And I could just picture it in my mind. So anyway, the congressman says to the director of security at the nuclear power plant, they put nuclear power plants away from, and they have highest security, and those guys are armed with shotguns, machine guns, and every, naturally. So they, the guy is saying, well, we have to, because we're, if we call for help, if it's a terrorist attack or something, it's going to be 30 minutes or 40 minutes before any police, sheriff, any type of help is going to get to us. And this is a nuclear power plant, and we're trained in using shotguns and, I don't know what all, I can't remember, all this stuff. And because we have to hold until the police can arrive and get there. And then, there was other questions like that. And I'm sure Mr. Ross was still looking around, Ooh, there, I hope you're taking a picture of me, So then the congressman, Mr. Ross, how do your security officers at the hospitals, how well are they trained? And he said, just like, just like him, he was saying that we were trained. We were trained with our 38 revolvers at that time, and then later, of course, we had, 40 caliber, auto, but we were not trained with shotguns and bazookas and tanks and anything like that, So anyway, I said, Mr. Ross, I got to, was the Senate, Mr. Ross, I got to report you to Senator Stuart Symington for perjury, or was it perjury or whatever it was the correct term, before Congress. And he, what? And I said, well, here, where you said that we were trained, the same. I'm sure when he got this paperwork, he probably, he was so, he might have thought we were trained, and no, but anyway, he went ballistic. Now, if he hadn't gone ballistic, you can report me, and you can also get out of my department. I don't want you in my department. You get out. You're, he didn't say fired because I've already been through that with him, and he couldn't fire me, But he went ballistic. Then instead of me saying, there's another funny part to that. Let me back up. When he wanted me to read, I was getting ready to go home. That was it. Yeah, off duty. When he said, "Oh, Jim, read this," thing, I said, "I want to go home. I'm done." He said, "Just read it. It won't take long," and it didn't, and everything. So I read it. Then I went over to the, and he was waiting at the office next door. We had 3 security offices, and he was waiting for me. Jim, what did you think? And I, no, I take it back. That's wrong. No, I didn't stay late. It was when he got the letter from the guy at the congressional committee that said, "Oh, yours is the best, the best I've seen of your write-up of your advanced testimony and that kind of stuff." So I was sitting, the secretary was sitting at her desk, the lieutenant was sitting at his desk, and Mr. Ross was there, and I was there, and I read it, or he told me what the thing said, I guess. And I said, "Mr. Ross, there isn't anybody who has to tell us what you're like." I forget exactly what I said, but we know what you're like. Everybody knows what you're like. And then I turned and left. And then he was telling them, "See, Jim's smart. See, Jim knows. He knows that, whatever." So the next day when I came to work, the lieutenant was at his desk and the secretary was at her desk, and I just walked up, and then they just broke down laughing, "Oh my God, because it just went over his head." Now, that was something I was going to mention, and we're running overtime here. I couldn't understand, after a while, I just couldn't take him anymore after over 4 years. And I just couldn't take him anymore. He just did stuff. I've mentioned some of it, I think. And I just thought, and it was all set up. The hospital had developed a biomed department. Of course, I didn't go to electronics. When I couldn't get into the military, I wanted to go to electronics, which was, back then it wasn't called, it was called radio TV repair. But I finally, he knew, Mr. Ross knew. "Mr. Ross, I just can't work for you anymore. I'm looking for a job someplace else." I said, I just can't work for you anymore. You're driving me crazy. And he said, but what kind of work? I said, I don't know. And I said, I'm not sure. And he said, I had a computer back then, or one of the few people that had computers. And he said, well, the biomed department here at the hospital, and those guys were paid good money. And it was a prestigious job, actually, work turned out, biomed. And I said, and he said, what about the biomed department here? Of course, I was thinking, no, I want to get as far away from this guy as I can get, And I said, yeah, I like electronics and stuff like that. I said, I have no training. And he said, go talk to the guy that's in charge of the department and talk to him. And I said, oh, okay, I'll go talk to him. So I went over, and the guy was real nice, by the way. The department was kind of small. I think it might have had like 7 people or something in it. And it's really amazing everything they have to do, everything they have to do, things they have to check. I mean, at hospitals, things need to be checked. Beds, electrical outlets in the walls, I mean, everything has to be checked and, listed that it's checked and all that kind of stuff. So I talked to him and he said, you've got a computer? I said, yeah. And he says, anyway, I talked to him a little bit and he said, Jim, he says, we need you in the department. He says, we need somebody to, enter all this kind of stuff into the computer, make up the charts and this kind of stuff and print out this stuff when he says, we need you, we want you. And he says, you got the job if you want it. So now that's the only time in my life I think that it looked like I was going to get that job. That's the only time I went to work someplace that I didn't know I can do the job. I never worried and always did the job. But I was thinking, I don't know, E equals IQ over, or not IQ, the things, that, I don't know, that I could do that. So I was kind of worried about that. But anyway, so the guy said, there are 2 or 3 people in the biomed department looking to move on to someplace else. Guys had been to a technician school and 2-year degree, associate's degrees and all that kind of stuff. And he said, you'll have the first opening. But in the meantime, I was still working in security, and Mr. Ross was driving me, and I couldn't understand why. Things that usually don't upset me too, but I couldn't understand, why is he that way? He's smart, and he was smart, very smart. I knew that. And that's why the things he did, I couldn't understand why in the world does he do the things that he, and you wouldn't believe the things. If you look back on old videos, you'll hear some of them and you won't fucking believe the things that he did. So anyway, it was entered into, they got with the employment office, what do they call them? They increased their name, their name became whatever it is. Human resources. So anyway, it was on my merit review that I got. And of course, I didn't get any more money. I hadn't been getting any more money for a long time because I was at the top of my, getting 7% each time put me. And there at the end, Mr. Ross was saying, I know the reason you're giving me so much trouble is because you're not getting pay increases. You're at the top of the pay scale. And that's not the reason. And I told him some of the reasons. But so anyway, he was still being, and I couldn't understand what is wrong with this guy. Now there were several things. One, I knew that he was an orphan or something, and he had, maybe he wasn't an orphan, I don't know, but he didn't know, he'd been trying to find his real mother and father, and he couldn't. I think that bothered him. And there was some other stuff too that I thought, but he just acted so stupid. But he wasn't. Much, much smarter than I was. Anyway, now, I moved on. I didn't get into the biomed department. He fired me. Now, he wasn't supposed to fire me. Administration told him he couldn't fire me. He could demote me from supervisor to just security officer, and he was told not to fire me. But and there was a meeting set up where the director of human resources was, because they had to do that with him, was going to be up there when I was called up there, and when Mr. Ross would be told, he could have decided to, okay, you're not a supervisor anymore. I never wanted to be a supervisor. And but Mr. Ross, and the administration told Mr. Ross to, that he had to have the human resources director with him when he talked to me. And he called the meeting early, and I'm not 100%, everything I've been telling you has been true, but one thing I'm not sure about is the assistant administrator of the hospital. He got in trouble because of his stupid. I liked the guy. He was the boss. The assistant administrator was in charge of security, we're the director of security, and all the non-medical things, purchasing, maintenance, and housekeeping, and food serving, all that kind of stuff. And then the other associate, or the other assistant administrator, was in charge of, medical people, nurses, doctors, well, not doctors, well, sort of doctors, all that kind of stuff. So, the assistant administrator of the hospital, who I liked, but my grievances went, first my grievance went to the director of security. And even when he gave me everything I wanted, the third grievance or something, whatever, okay, Jim, you're in charge of this, you're in charge of this, and everything you want, I'm giving you. And then here's the thing you'd sign, that, the thing, and I signed disapproved on, the disapproved line. Mr. Ross, no, Jim, you signed the wrong line. I said, no, I'm not accepting, your thing, and I'm going to the next step, to the to administration. And he didn't get his pay raise that he was supposed to get. And he was told that if he didn't stop doing such and such, and whatever, his job was in jeopardy, that type of stuff. And of course, Mr. Ross didn't, he didn't understand that. I mean, he didn't understand that. Because after he got called to administration, and the assistant administrator told him, if you do this, you're going to be fired. Do not do this. Do not yell at employees. Do not do this. All this kind of stuff that he was told, that I had written up that he had done. And and we knew, and it bothered me that they called down his secretary and asked her about him. I mean, I'm glad she told the truth, and stuck up and stuff like that. But that kind of bothered me. But when he got down there and they chewed his ass out, and we knew he was down there. Now, it didn't bother me that he was getting his ass chewed out. It did bother me that, his secretary was called down and she told the truth. And it did bother me that he was so stupid. That how could he get himself in that kind of a position, you know? But anyway, he comes upstairs, you know. Oh, Jim, I just had a talk with the administration, and from now on, you're also in charge of snow removal, because that was one of my grievances in there, that it sounds, the whole thing, you know. None of that should have happened, you know. Well, anyway, so I'm all set to go into biomed department, but it got where I could not stand him I couldn't stand him anymore. He'd call me too, I was, you know, and I'm a person, I put up with stuff. You know, I worked as a welder and worked down by the river. There wasn't any place there to piss or shit, well, there was a place to piss or shit, but the supervisor would say, do you need to piss or do you need to shit? If you need to piss, just piss down the river, you know, bank. And I put up with that kind of stuff. But anyway, it got where just the voice on the radio of the director of security, and so it got where, like, it was shift change time, and we had to change, you know, officers and get the different keys, you know, get a charge. You know, the other guys turned in the old walkie-talkie, and we got a charge. We were all in the 2 shifts right there, and that going on, and his voice, the director of security's voice, came over the radio, and I said, "Turn your radios off." And they, you know, the other officers look at me like, "What's going on?" And I just turned their radios off. I could not stand to hear his voice. You wouldn't believe the stuff he did on the radio. You know, attention, you know, all officers. There was like 3 of us, me and a couple other officers, you know. There's a storm coming in. We may need, well, no, he called me to call in the second shift early, and all of them, because of snow was going to be coming. No fucking snow came. And the thing that I did a grievance for, we had a female security officer on the day shift. She voluntarily worked overtime. This was either her birthday or her husband's birthday or something, and she said, "Am I going to be able to?" You know, I said, "Sure, take it off. You got it off. You're okay." And then he calling me. He says, "Call in all off-duty security." And that was just her, you know, one that wasn't there or something. So I went back and I said, "Mr. Ross, she's, you know." "No, call her in. I said, "Mr. Ross, you know, no. So I went back and I called her, and she's a real nice lady. And she said, "Well, I'll do a grievance." And I said, nobody did grievances, by the way, at any of the hospitals except me. Even a massive hospital, really big, that I went to work for, and worked for them. And the nurses at the hospital, you know, there was like hundreds of nurses or whatever. They had some kind of grievance, or they wanted to do a grievance. And they said, "How do you do a grievance around here?" Nobody knew. And then, "Where do you get a grievance form?" Nobody knew. And then some of the nurses, I guess, somehow had heard about me, because I did a couple of grievances there. Anyway, so the nurses, of course I was working midnight shift, you know, so the nurses, you know, some of them came to look me up. Are you the security guard that does grievances? Yeah. Well, how do we do it, you know? Where do we get the form? But So anyway, so Mr. Ross called me up on this grievance that I did, and he called me up early, and I knew he was going to do that. I knew he was going to fire me on Friday. Well, he told it just happened, we had a meeting of security officers. Every 2 or 3 months we had a meeting of security officers. I was the guy who Mr. Ross put me in charge of doing the training. Now, I didn't do the training. I had, we paid instructors from the Kansas City Police Academy to come over, stuff like that. And the first time that happened, first time I got that set up, the guy came, the meetings were 2 hours long. Mr. Ross talked for an hour and 45 minutes, and then he said, "Oh, okay, now." So I told Mr. Ross, I said, we're paying these people, paying this guy to come over, And you talked for an hour and 45 minutes, and I said, "No more." I said, "How much time are you going to take, and how much time do you need?" And he said, 15 minutes, Jim. I said, "Okay, you got 15 minutes." At the next meeting that we had, a couple of months, 2 or 3 months later, he got up and instead of doing the thing he normally did, talk about himself and all the things he was going to do that he never did, all the electronic door lights, everything that he was going to get, which he never got. I was surprised, he said, after like 15 minutes, he said, "Jim only gave me 15 minutes, so then he turned the thing over, to our program." But anyway, when now this, everything I've told you is 100% true, and if it's but I'm not telling you that this thing is true. When he called me up early, I knew he would do that, and I could have stopped it. On Friday, I knew he would. He told, we're having a meeting of security officers, and I came in at the last, just the last minute. They're all there, and I had done a grievance, and I leaned over backwards. I was working the day shift. I wasn't a supervisor, and I was ending up having to relieve like 7 parking lot attendants, or see that I could get, and 6 security officers or something. I forget, something like that. So I was doing, okay, you 3 parking lot attendants, I can sit here in the patrol car and I can watch what you're doing. Go have lunch, And then I did everything I could, and I was doing it. But I was on my activity sheet every day that I did that. No lunch, no lunch, no lunch. Oh, also, I was coming in earlier than any of the other security officers because I was assigned to be down in a parking lot that nobody showed up at. No employees parked down in that parking lot. I told Mr. Ross nobody parked there for like an hour and a half or 2 hours. It was unnecessary for me with a parking lot attendant with me. We sat down there and bullshitted and joked for 2 hours. And I told him, explained to him, nobody shows up. So, anyway, I knew that Mr. Ross was going to. Oh, okay, that was the deal. So I come into the meeting, and that was the thing. I come into the meeting, and Mr. Ross says, "And your grievance isn't going to go anywhere." Oh, I made him pay me. I said that was the thing. You have to pay me for all these months, time and a half for the lunch that I didn't get. And anyway, So he comes in. You're wrong, Jim. I got called to Human Resources, and I said, no, you're going to have to pay me. That's just the way it is. You're going to lose this. I talked to the hospital's labor attorney, and he says, no, we don't have to pay you. And I said, you did not talk to the hospital labor attorney, because even there are labor attorneys who work for corporations and everything else, and even you're not going to find one of them that says they don't have, that don't have to pay, and so then then the fire alarm went off. No, they didn't. The alarm didn't go off. It was outside, right outside administrative windows. And he would, if anything happened outside administrative windows or anything happened to do with administration, he would run. He had a bad leg. He ran. He would run to administration. He would call administration too and tell them everything and go down there all the time. Now, okay, he had me, by the way, when he went on vacation or was sick, which happened a few times, things like they'd be in the hospital or whatever, he'd have me be, there was a lieutenant, but he would have me be in charge. And of course you can imagine the other supervisors, and we went through that. I went through that with him. I said, Mr. Ross, rotate it. Don't always, he wouldn't, he'd say, oh, okay. But anyway, so anyway, I did this grievance. And then there was a call that there was smoke outside the office, the windows next to the administrative office. And now normally Mr. Ross would have knocked everybody down, running to get down there but he didn't fucking care, And so I said, well, I'll go down and take care of it. I went down. They had wood in there, gravel and pretty rocks and some wood stuff we put in. Somehow it caught, and I stomped it out. I came back up. I came in, and of course, got real quiet when I stepped in. He had told all the officers there, Jim's going to be fired. He's going to be fired tomorrow or Monday or something like that. It was a Friday. And now they didn't say anything to me. I mean, none of my buddies or anything. They were like, oh, I must have been a supervisor then. Yeah, I was, because I was relieving people. And so they thought, opening for supervisor, But anyway, so I knew, and I actually came Monday morning when I came to work, I brought my grievances that I had done and my write-ups of things that were wrong. And I went up, got the keys, got the radio, that kind of stuff, went back down to the parking garage where I had the parking lot attendants I was in charge of. And then they were like, especially like one of them, what's going on, Jim? I said, nothing. He said, what's going on? Tell me. I said, Mr. Ross is going to fire me here in a few minutes. He'll call me up and fire me. And he goes, no. I said, no, he's going to fire me. And so then a little bit there was a call, and I went up and he stepped in. He said, you're fired. And I said, okay, goodbye. Went down, turned my stuff in. I had over the years bought law enforcement books, Thomas Publications. They had a whole, and I bought them all. I read them all. And then I had taken all of them, as I read them, put them in the down at the main, in the security office, and then when I was fired or whatever, the lieutenant or whatever said, what about your books? I said, leave them for the guys, stuff like that, let them have it, and so then I went out and I drove over to, I brought a change of clothes. I drove over to Kansas City, Kansas, to the federal office building and got an, let's see, what was it? Meeting. I knew the problem was going to be. I was a supervisor, and I wasn't going to be covered. But anyway, I'm there, and I hadn't had breakfast. I was planning on having breakfast if I didn't get fired at research. So anyway, the lawyer that I'm talking to, and I had everything. Statements that Mr. Ross had made against unions, that he was going to not allow unions to form. I mean, everything you can't do, he did. God damn. Anyway, after about a few hours, my stomach was growling, and I thought, please, I don't want to do this. I want to go home and eat. I'll forget about the fucking grievance. Let me go home and eat. And then we were there for a whole bunch of hours, this guy. Then he got all done. He said, Mr. Howard, he said, wow, you got everything, I kept a diary. What Mr. Ross said in the meeting, who he talked to about such and such, and the things that he did. It was a perfect case. He says, the only problem is that, you're a supervisor, and I don't think this is going to, do it. And of course I lied. I'm not somebody who ever really lies, and people don't believe that. But I don't. I've never lied or told stories that weren't true, And so I said, well, I don't hire or fire. And he said, yeah. Anyway, he said, we'll see. And but the one thing, at least, with that department, when somebody, an employee or whatever the situation is in this situation, files a paperwork, whether you win or lose, it stays there. And I don't know for how long, but I think for a long time, if somebody looks up, Trinity Lutheran, well, they don't exist anymore, but if you would look up Trinity Lutheran Hospital, there would be a report of each person who had filed a complaint, even if they didn't win. But, so, now this I do not know for sure, because only 2 people told me, and I never bothered to check. That assistant hospital administrator that I liked, and he was buddy with Mr. Ross, the director of security. They lived out in Overland Park, that's an area of Kansas, not Kansas City, not even Missouri, but right across. Not everybody that lives there is rich, but that's Overland Park. All the department heads, lived in there, and all the chiefs of police and everybody, they lived, in nice houses out there and stuff. I couldn't afford to live there. But, so Mr. Ross and him would ride to work. Mr. Ross would drive him to work when he came, and Mr. Ross would drive him in his, Mr. Ross's Cadillac. Their kids went to the same schools. Well, I'm not sure the same. Somebody's kid might have been in grade school and the other in high school. I don't know. But same school. They had barbecues together and all that kind of stuff. The assistant administrator was fired. That's what I was told. They had no reason to lie to me. I didn't call up and ask. I forget why I called. So, wow, how long? Oh, God. An hour and 30 minutes. Okay, there's going to be a question to ask. You'll be getting a questionnaire in the mail and a questionnaire online. And there will be questions to ask. I'm kidding. Am I? Anyway, thank you very much for